Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I am finally announcing my Letterboxd 4 for the February theme, which was Black History Month. And first off, I want to just start this video by saying, again, thank you to everyone who showed all the support and comments and likes and everything during all my Oscars-related content over the last month. I believe it ended up being, I think it was exactly like 31 straight days. I want to say it was like from the last day of January all the way to March 2nd, every single day uploading a video. So it was really fun doing that and seeing all of the support. So again, thank you for all of that. But it was also nice after after the Oscars reaction to finally kind of take a break and not have to force myself to get an upload up every single night. So it's nice to kind of have this break. Now, again, if you have joined or subscribed to the channel from that, I do want to give you just kind of a quick rundown for what this series is. So this series is this year. Each month I'm doing a different theme, and then throughout that month I'm watching a bunch of movies that fit that theme and then deciding what my Letterboxd for that theme is. So in January the theme was Best Picture winners, so you can go and watch. I'll put the link in the description as well for the kind of the results video of what ended up being in my Letterboxd for Best Picture winners. And then in February the theme was Black History Month. Now in that video, because of all of the in the setup for that video, because of all the Oscars movies and stuff that I was watching, I knew I wasn't going to get this uploaded until about a week or so into March. So apologies for this being a little bit later, but this is always kind of when I knew I was going to have time to actually see enough of the movies to make a compelling video here. But so this is just the results here for the Black History Month theme. Now, again, also how this series works is I do a video at the beginning of the month where I say that there's these 10 set films that I'm gonna watch, these 10 plus however many others I can get to, and then just one quick last little stipulation of what qualifies a film for this. The entire thing for this was it was a celebration of black filmmakers, and so the entire idea was that just the only thing that a movie had to do in order to qualify for being in consideration here for this list is it just had to have a black director and then a black lead. So that's what all 20 plus of these films, haven't totaled up the exact number, but that's all of the films that I saw that fit this criteria within I decided to do just pretty much since the start of 2025, so the last 2 months. Anything that I saw in the last 2 months is here. So we're going to start off with just kind of a quick rundown of all of the films that didn't make the Letterboxd 4. So without further ado, let's take a look at those films. Moonlight. Directed by Barry Jenkins, starring Trevante Rhodes, Mahershala Ali, and Andre Holland. Of course this would have made my Letterboxd 4, but just a reminder that this was ineligible due to it being in the Best Picture Letterboxd 4, and each film is only eligible once. A very intimate and beautiful coming-of-age film. The story is told in 3 parts, and the acting, especially from all 3 actors playing Chiron, is powerful. Nickel Boys. Directed by Ramel Ross, starring Ethan Heresy, Brandon Wilson, and Ingenue Ellis-Taylor. Nominated for Best Picture at this year's Academy Awards, Nickel Boys is an emotional tale of 2 young men at a reform school. The film is one of the most beautifully shot films I have ever seen, with the first-person POV being used to great effect to add to the intimate nature of the film. The script builds up to a phenomenal third act that had me holding my breath throughout. The 6888. Directed by Tyler Perry, starring Kerry Washington, Ebony Obsidian, and Shanice Williams. I watched this for the Diane Warren song nominated for Original Song at the Oscars. I surprisingly liked the song quite a bit, but unfortunately the film didn't work for me. Kerry Washington and Ebony Obsidian are standouts, but the script and direction leave a lot to be desired. One of Them Days. Directed by Lawrence Lamont, starring Keke Palmer, SZA, and Joshua David Neal. Potentially one of the bigger surprises of the month for me. I wasn't very interested in the trailer, but Keke Palmer and SZA's chemistry made it a very enjoyable movie-going experience. I don't know how well I'll remember the film years to come, but while watching the film it was a fun time. Loose. Directed by Julius Onah, starring Kelvin Harrison Jr. and Octavia Spencer. This film made me a massive fan of Kelvin Harrison Jr. the first time I saw it, but on this rewatch I was blown away by how great Octavia Spencer is. There's so much tension and suspense packed into the screenplay. 2019 is my favorite year for films, and this is very high up on that year's Best of the Year list. Captain America: Brave New World. Directed by Julius Onah, starring Anthony Mackie. As far as celebrating films from black directors and black leads go, this feels like it just coincidentally makes the list as opposed to having a strong voice in the category. As far as its entry into the MCU, this film is pretty low for me. There is a lot of choppy editing, sloppy dialogue, and ultimately a story that didn't captivate me. Do the Right Thing. Directed by Spike Lee, starring Spike Lee, Ossie Davis, and Ruby Dee. An excellent A Day in the Life film. Throughout the first two acts, you're feeling the energy of the film, and you feel like you're with the characters in this neighborhood. Once you get to the third act, the tension and emotions boiling throughout the film explode and create an unforgettable finale. 13th, directed by Ava DuVernay. The film is an excellent documentary covering racial inequality, specifically in the prison system. The interviews and the stories are all informative and effectively shed light on a failure that we are still dealing with in this country. While it's a very well done and important film, it's tough to rank it as one of my favorite films. Friday, directed by F. Gary Gray, starring Ice Cube, Chris Tucker, and Nia Long. A classic film, and for good reason. I had seen this once 10 plus years ago, and had forgotten how many iconic quotes and pop culture references came from this film. While I had fun watching this, it ultimately isn't one of my favorite films, but I can totally see why it is regarded as a favorite for so many people. His House, directed by Remy Weeks, starring Sope Dirisu and Wunmi Mosaku. The first time I saw this a couple years ago, I was completely blown away. This is my second time seeing the film, and while it isn't as good as I remember, it is still a good film. There are several truly scary moments, and the crafting of this world is phenomenal. Nope, directed by Jordan Peele, starring Daniel Kaluuya and Keke Palmer. Nope is a beautifully shot film, and one that I'm glad had an IMAX release. My potentially hot take is that this is my least favorite of Jordan Peele's 3 films. I do like it more and more with each watch, but the love I had for his previous 2 films on the first watch is too strong for me to move this above them. Us, directed by Jordan Peele, starring Lupita Nyong'o, Winston Duke, and Shahadi Wright-Joseph. It's not on the same level as Get Out for me, but on first watch I knew this would be one of my favorite films. The second act of the film, being one long extended scene, is so gripping that even on my 10th plus watch of the film, I'm still on the edge of my seat. A sophomore film so good that it cemented Jordan Peele as one of my favorite directors of all time. Boys in the Hood, directed by John Singleton, starring Cuba Gooding Jr., Lawrence Fishburne, and Ice Cube. This film felt very similar to Do the Right Thing for me, in the sense that for 2 acts you're just experiencing the lives of our characters, just for the tension to explode in the third act. I was appreciating so much of what the first 2 acts were setting up, but the finale of this film is remarkable and some of my favorite filmmaking ever. I've always been a fan of Ice Cube's comedic acting, but this is the first serious role of his that I have seen, and I was blown away by how great he is. Straight Outta Compton, directed by F. Gary Gray, starring O'Shea Jackson, Corey Hawkins, and Jason Mitchell. I saw this film in theaters and liked it, despite only having a limited knowledge of Ice Cube and Dr. Dre. Seeing this again all these years later, as I know more about the West Coast rap scene and the lives of the members of NWA, has helped me appreciate the film even more. It was quite possibly the first musician biopic I had ever seen, and it sets the bar very high for what a musician biopic should look like. And then just another reminder for those that just need a reminder, or if you didn't see the setup video. In the setup video, like I said, I give you 10 films that I'm going to watch. I give you what my current Letterboxd 4 is, 3 contenders, and then 3 films that I just have not seen. And the idea is to see if any of those 6 films are able to crack into the Letterboxd 4. This month, there was a film that has cracked into the new Letterboxd 4, so that means a film does have to fall out of the Letterboxd 4, so let's talk about that film, 12 Years a Slave. Directed by Steve McQueen, starring Chiwetel Ejiofor and Lupita Nyong'o. It feels weird to have the film in both January and February's themes and still not have it crack into either Letterboxd 4. The film is exceptionally made and worthy of all the praise and accolades it's received. At the end of the day, I just have a hard time saying I loved it enough to make it over some of the other films, but I'm sure the film will eventually make a themed Letterboxd 4 as the series continues. And now it's time to announce the final Letterboxd 4 for Black History Month. The first film is BlacKkKlansman. Colorado Springs, late 1970s, Ron Stallworth, an African-American police officer, and Flip Zimmerman, his Jewish colleague, run an undercover operation to infiltrate the Ku Klux Klan. The film won for Best Adapted Screenplay at the 2019 Academy Awards. It was also nominated for Best Picture, Best Director for Spike Lee, Best Supporting Actor for Adam Driver, Best Editing, and Best Original Score. BlacKkKlansman is directed by Spike Lee and stars John David Washington, Adam Driver, and Laura Harrier. Now, I saw BlacKkKlansman in the theater, years ago, when it came out, and it's interesting kind of looking back on it now, because it seems, weird to say, but I think it's true. I think this was the first Spike Lee film that I had ever seen, and this was also at a time in my life where I wasn't really, because, this came out in, 2018, so I wasn't really, big into going to the movies. I would go to a movie here and there, and I truly, in hindsight, I can't remember why. Why did I... Just at that point in my life, all I was really seeing was, comedies and horror movies, and so it's why did I go and see this, But I'm glad that I did, because I remember going and seeing it and just being from the opening, from the very beginning of the scene, just kind of the opening scene with like Alec Baldwin as he's kind of reading his lines and is trying to incite, hate and stuff and everything that he's doing. I remember just kind of being gripped, being like, oh, this is like a serious film. This is an important film. And I think in hindsight, maybe looking back at it, I think I remember the trailers. Maybe, I mean, because this is comedic. There is some comedic elements, obviously, in this film, and so I think maybe the trailers advertised it as more of like a straight up comedy. But I remember going in and seeing this and just being kind of blown away by, and obviously it was going to have the serious nature of it as well, but just like how important and how like emotional of a film it made me. And then of course there's something to say for BlacKkKlansman, and again for Spike Lee films in general. Again, this was the first time that I had seen a Spike Lee film, so when we get to that ending of the film where the story ends and then there's all this archival footage and talking about again, I don't want to say anything, just in case you haven't seen this film. I want you to kind of get the emotional impact of what happens in that third act. But I remember back then seeing this in theaters being like, oh, this is so relevant and this is so, like, like having this tacked on is such an, like, I think I remember at the time a lot of people didn't like it, but for me I was just like, oh, this is like, to have a story where you're showing kind of the problems and the failures within what's going on in this investigation of where we have a black man and a Jewish man kind of infiltrating the Ku Klux Klan, and seeing kind of the failures in terms of like getting this under wraps, and all of a sudden now you get to the end and you see like, oh, this is a story told, what is it, the 70s, and all of a sudden you get present day kind of footage at the end of the film that's like, oh, this is still a very relevant and a very big problem that is still kind of carrying over into present day. I remember just being kind of floored by like them doing that, but also B, just being caught off guard because I hadn't seen a Spike Lee film, and now that I've seen a couple more, I realize he does this every now and then, where he'll put in, kind of splice in some archival footage, or he'll put something in the film that kind of just adds such an emotional punch to kind of the themes or the idea of the narrative of what they're telling. And so BlacKkKlansman does that, and I remember again in the theater being like, oh, this is so important and so relevant. And here we are, like, what is it, 8 years later, 7 years later, watching it again and being like, we're in the same spot. We're doing the same thing again as we get to the ending of this film. As I'm watching all the archival footage talking about it's a specific event. I guess it's not like that big of a spoiler to talk about. I guess if you don't want to know at all what I'm talking about, just go watch the film and then come back to this video. But the ending of the film talking about kind of the white supremacist rally at Charlottesville and the impact that everything that happened at that event and what caused that to happen, what caused a uprising and a white supremacist rally to feel comfortable coming out and doing that. And so I think it's an important kind of thing that it's just crazy to think that 8 years later or 7 years or however long it's been since this film came out, to see the ending of that film and just be like, this is still such an important, like, we haven't really fixed, like, in the film. Once you get to kind of the end of the narrative structure of the film, you realize everything that they did maybe solved one little thing, but it hasn't solved the entire problem. And then you get to the end of this film and it's kind of the same thing, where you realize that we still haven't exactly solved this problem. And so it's just one of those things that, watching this film a second time all these years later, realizing how just impactful and how important of a message, I guess, once we get to the end, the themes of this film are still carrying on today. Realizing how important that was just really kind of impacted me. As far as talking about the film itself goes, obviously incredible acting throughout. John David Washington, I think this was probably the first film I'd ever seen of him, as well, and Adam Driver, they're both phenomenal in this film. So the acting from top to bottom, in the serious, the dramatic moments, it all comes together so well. And another just big thing for me is like the score of this film is so beautiful and haunting and intense. Like, it is such a beautiful arrangement of a music that just really kind of sets the tone. And the last thing that I want to kind of talk about is that this film probably has like my favorite needle drop ever. When they're at kind of the party and he's talking to Laura Harrier's character, and it drops the, I Believe I'm Falling in Love, like that song. I remember kind of like being like into it kind of the first time, but there's something about this the second time that I'm like, this is such a beautiful moment of this film, and I love that needle drop so much. Just that entire scene is just a great scene. There's just so much about this film that so many all of the decisions that Spike Lee makes throughout this film just worked for me. And I'll be honest, when I was doing the preview, when I did my Letterboxd for like the preview, I put this in there and I was kind of like, this feels like the one that would probably fall out on a second watch because I'd only seen it the one time. I remember really liking it, but like I'm like, I don't know if on a second watch if I'm gonna love it enough to where like it's going to be able to withstand if there is another, film that comes in. And on the second watch, it was one of those that I was like, no, I like this even more on the second watch. This was cemented as one of my favorite, probably my favorite Spike Lee film. Again, admittedly I haven't seen a whole ton of his filmography. I've seen a couple, but from the ones that I have seen, it's probably my favorite film of his. I really just enjoyed this a whole lot more in a second watch, and it submitted itself here there in the Letterboxd 4. The next film is Get Out. Chris and his girlfriend Rose go upstate to visit her parents for the weekend. At first, Chris reads the family's overly accommodating behavior as nervous attempts to deal with their daughter's interracial relationship. But as the weekend progresses, a series of increasingly disturbing discoveries lead him to a truth that he never could have imagined. The film won for Best Original Screenplay at the 2018 Academy Awards. It was also nominated for Best Picture, Best Director for Jordan Peele, and Best Actor for Daniel Kaluuya. Get Out is directed by Jordan Peele and stars Daniel Kaluuya, Allison Williams, and Bradley Whitford. And this is another thing I probably should have mentioned at the beginning of this video. I mentioned in the setup video at the beginning of February that because the whole point of this is it's just a celebration of black cinema and of black filmmakers, that I decided I only wanted to do one film for each director in the Letterboxd 4. And so that's why Us didn't make the list. Us most likely would have. It's one of my favorite films. Like, I loved Us, so it would have made it in here, but I only wanted to have one Jordan Peele film just kind of representing the Letterboxd 4. And again, if you know anything about my channel, you knew it was going to be Get Out. It's it probably is my favorite film of all time. There's another series, another Letterboxd 4 series that I do on my channel that if you want to go and watch, I'll put a link to the Get Out Letterboxd 4 video in the description if you want to go watch that and get my full thoughts on how much I love Get Out. But it's one of those films for me that I think kind of changed the way that I view film. And I say this in that video, and I'll say it every time I talk about this film, because at this point in my life, I wasn't really big into going to the movies. I would go occasionally, and when I would go, it was to go see a comedy, and it was to go see a horror movie. And again, it was one of those that I can say, I like comedy and I liked horror, and that's what I would watch, but it's like, it was bad comedy and it was bad horror. Like, that's what I would go and watch. And, it's like if there was something like, I think this is a little too early for The Witch. Yeah, The Witch hadn't come out yet, but like things like that where if there was like kind of a more prestigious or elevated horror, I guess is the term that we used. If there was one of those, I probably kind of skipped it because I was like, oh no, give me Annabelle, give me The Nun, give me, like the jump scare horrors. Like that was my idea of what a horror film was is to just go sit down and just get jump scared every 10 minutes in very predictable formulaic ways. And then, Get Out, I remember seeing the trailer, and I think ended up going and seeing it solely because I just loved the Key and Peele sketches, and I was just so interested in, like, what's a comedian's take on horror going to be? And so I go and I watch this film, and I'm just blown away by how scared I was, and it not just being, there are some jump scares, but it not being just like a weak horror movie that's just like a couple jump scares and then you leave and you're just like, oh, okay, that was kind of dumb, or some of those scares weren't all that, I wasn't really all that scared. Get Out is one of those I remember leaving and just thinking, that was like, maybe some of the scares didn't always work, or maybe some of the scares really did, but at the end of the day, it was still just such a great story and such a captivating from start to finish. Like, it wasn't just jump scares for the sake of jump scares. Everything was servicing the plot, and it was servicing where the story was heading. And I remember just kind of leaving being like, I didn't know that horror films could be that good. I didn't know that like, just from what at that point in my life, what I was going and seeing was just kind of the dumb jump scare horrors. And so then seeing this and being like, I just didn't realize that this is what this genre could be. And so it was one of those things that it just kind of changed the way that I view film and the way I view the horror genre specifically, to where I fell in love with this film, and since that day it's probably the movie I've seen the most in my life, and it's the one that, just because how much it impacted, again, just the way that I see film, it forever is always going to kind of have that spot in my, my Letterboxd 4, and as probably, my favorite film of all time. I love Get Out. If you haven't seen it, obviously go see it. But just the acting of the film is phenomenal. Jordan Peele, this is where, I think the first time seeing this, I was kind of a big fan of, like, the script, obviously, but between this and Us, kind of, within like a 2 year span, I just instantly was like, I fell in love with him as, like, not just a director, but like as a screenwriter. The stories, the scripts, the things that he's able to put onto the paper that becomes, the story, I just think was so phenomenal and so inspired that I just truly fell in love with Jordan Peele as a filmmaker from this film. So again, I can't say enough about how much I love Get Out. I have a full, again, I'll put the link in the description. It's like a 40+ minute video of me talking about Get Out if you want to hear the full thoughts on that. Again, I just absolutely love this film, and I don't think this is a surprise to anyone who knows the channel, knows how much I love the film. You knew this was going to be here in the Letterboxd 4. The next film is Judas and the Black Messiah. Bill O'Neill infiltrates the Black Panthers on the orders of FBI agent Mitchell and J. Edgar Hoover. As Black Panther chairman Fred Hampton ascends, falling for a fellow revolutionary en route, a battle wages for O'Neill's soul. The film won for Best Supporting Actor for Daniel Kaluuya and Best Original Song at the 2021 Academy Awards. It was also nominated for Best Picture, Best Supporting Actor for Lakeith Stanfield, Best Original Screenplay, and Best Cinematography. Judas and the Black Messiah is directed by Shaka King and stars Daniel Kaluuya, Lakeith Stanfield, and Jesse Plemons. And Judas and the Black Messiah is interesting, I think, for multiple reasons. The first being, obviously, because of Get Out. I already love Daniel Kaluuya, and he was one of my favorite actors from that film, and I think I was pretty confident being like, oh yeah, he's one of my favorite actors, and I had seen him in some other things. I think post Get Out was probably the first thing that I saw him in, and then I'd gone back and watched some of his other stuff, and I kind of was just like, yeah, he's just one of my, favorite actors. Then we get to Judas and the Black Messiah, and watching this and just being like, no, not only is he one of my favorite actors, he's just one of the best actors that we have. Like, he is just phenomenal. He is so good in this role. He is so good in this film, and I'm so glad that, he was able to essentially just sweep that entire award season, sweep all the way to the Oscars, and win the Oscar for this role, because he is just so amazing in this film. But like the whole cast is as well. Obviously this is also, I think, the film that submitted Lakeith Stanfield for me as one of my favorite actors. I had seen, obviously, he's in Get Out as well, and then he's I'd seen Atlanta at this point, and I think he was in, I think the second Purge movie had already come out at this point. I'm trying to think. Lakeith Stanfield, I'd seen him in Straight Outta Compton, another film that we talked about. Like, I'd seen Lakeith Stanfield in so many other things, but I kind of had just like always just been like, okay, yeah, he's a fine actor. But then this is another one that just cemented him for me. That I'm like, no, he is phenomenal. Jesse Plemons as well. I think, was this, yeah, this would have been after Game Night, so I'd already seen him, in something else where I'm like, again, I loved him, but this just submitted him as like, he is phenomenal. He is just a great actor. Dominique Fishback, is that her name? She's excellent in this. Again, just, you can go down the entire cast of this film. Everyone is phenomenal in this film. And this film also is really interesting to me in the sense that this is the 2021 Academy Awards when this was nominated for the 2020 films. And I think 2020 is one of those years that, like, gets, especially like at the Oscars specifically, kind of gets a lot of flack for not being, like, 2020 obviously just wasn't a great year for movies, and we obviously all know why, but there's something about that specific Best Picture lineup. There were so many films that year that I just loved, and Judas and the Black Messiah is probably, I think it was my favorite of that group. But I mean, you had Judas and the Black Messiah, Sound of Metal, The Father, Minari. Like, you had so many just great films in that year's Best Picture lineup. And again, Judas and the Black Messiah, I think, is my favorite of that group, because it's such a powerful and emotional film that is just powered by these again, just absolute powerhouse performances from all of our leads. And the other thing that, you have to give a lot of credit for this film is, again, just the script as well. The way that it was weaved so beautifully together of having multiple viewpoints. Essentially, you have all of these different characters that are established early in the film, and everyone has very distinct and very focused objectives of what they're trying to do. This character, Fred Hampton, you got Daniel Kaluuya, he's just trying to start a revolution, trying to lead a revolution, is trying to, be the voice. And then you've got Lakeith Stanfield that is kind of infiltrating, but he has kind of ulterior motives, but he also, as the film is going on, maybe he's kind of buying into what's being told. And then you've got the FBI, who obviously they have a very strict, very focused idea of what their objective, what they're trying to do, and it gets more and more intense as the film goes on. So you have all of these different players that all know what they're doing. They're all have distinct objectives, and as the film goes on, the objectives maybe either change or they soften, or maybe they get even more strict and more focused on what they're trying to do. But everyone's kind of keeping all these, especially starting with Lakeith Stanfield's character, where he's kind of playing both sides and he's trying to keep secrets from both sides as the film's going on. It creates for these very tense and very nerve-wracking kind of edge of your seat type of scenes. And this is one of those films that I think the screenplay, the script, does such a phenomenal job of setting that tone and really kind of getting you into this nervous state where you are just, again, like I think saying you're on the edge of your seat is kind of like an overused expression, but I mean, it's the best way to really describe the way that I feel even to this day still watching this. This is probably my third or fourth time watching this film now at this point, and I'm still like nervous during some of those scenes where you're nervous thinking like, oh, is he going to get found out? What's going to happen to him? Are they going to kill him? Like, what's going to happen here? What are they going to do to Lakeith Stanfield's character? And then there's certain scenes where it seems like Daniel Kaluuya's maybe in a little bit of more trouble with, like, he maybe is arrested, or he's kind of under attack. Or there's the scene where he walks into the pool house, the bar, and is talking to some other revolutionary, just some other group there, and all of a sudden there's a little bit of an interaction there between those two, and it gets a little tense and you don't know what's going to happen. And just throughout it all, Daniel Kaluuya, the star performance that he delivers, just again, it makes the script work very well, but it also just it creates and it really sells the tension that the film is building up. And so just from start to finish, this is just very gripping and emotional, and especially once you get to the end of this film, very emotional. And it's what really kind of solidifies the film for me as something that I remember kind of enjoying watching, and then by the end, once you get to the end of that third act, being like, no, I loved this film on first watch, and each watch it holds up. It is still just a great film. So I love Judas and the Black Messiah. And the final film is Love and Basketball. Monica Wright and Quincy McCall grew up in the same neighborhood and have known each other since childhood. As they grow into adulthood, they fall in love, but they also share another all-consuming passion, basketball. As Quincy and Monica struggle to make their relationship work, they follow separate career paths through high school and college basketball and, they hope, into stardom in big league professional ball. Sanaa Lathan won for Best Actress at the BET Awards, the Black Reel Awards, and the NAACP Awards. Love and Basketball is directed by Gina Prince Bythewood and stars Sanaa Lathan, Omar Epps, and Alfre Woodard. Now, Love and Basketball, if you saw the preview video, was one of the films that I put in the I had never seen category, but I was going to give it a shot. I was going to watch Love and Basketball. And again, I'm glad I did, because obviously it made its way into the Letterboxd 4. It's what took 12 Years a Slave spot. But it's also one of those that, looking back at it, it's insane that I hadn't seen this yet. Like, this is so my film, because I've always loved a good love story, a good romance film. And obviously, as you can tell from, a lot of the clothes, or, especially my hats that I wear in some of these videos, I'm a big basketball fan. Like, I love basketball. It is before movies, like sports were my number one passion. And and it's now they're kind of even. Like, I love them both equally, but specifically not just sports but basketball. Like, that was my first love. That was the sport that I played. It was the sport that just consumed my life as a kid growing up. Like, I loved basketball to the point that, like, I would watch a lot of basketball films, and it's funny looking back at it now. I probably didn't watch the greatest of basketball film. Like some of them were kind of the not that good of films. But again, I as a kid I didn't have especially I mean even as into like teenage years I didn't have a great sense of what a good film was. So I did watch a lot of kind of rough stuff, but I would watch a lot of basketball films. And this is one looking at it that now that I've even gotten into movies and fell in love with cinema a little bit more. This is a film I probably should have seen by now. It's 100% up my alley. There was no, other than just like laziness and not going and finding it, is the only real reason I'd never seen this film. And I'm so glad I finally took the time out to actually watch it because I was just in love with this film from start to finish. There are a lot of things, about the relationship that sometimes, some of the things didn't really work for me. I didn't like the kind of the way the relationship is going, but that's what I think makes it compelling. Is it's a real relationship. It's these two people that are both putting basketball first, and the way that they treat each other because of their love for their number one love being basketball, it kind of makes them not the best partner at times in their life, and they go through these flows, and the film is told in pretty much four parts. You talk about, it breaks up into the first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter, and as you're going throughout, you see the ups and downs of their relationship. And sometimes they are rock solid, and sometimes they are completely broken up because they can't make time for each other outside of basketball being like their number one passion. And it's really a film about these two having to work through that and to find a way to make time for a relationship and for a partner when you're so all consumed by something else, and in this case basketball. And again, this is just one of those films that should have I I should have known I would have loved this the entire time again because I love basketball so much. And there's just something about this film specifically. This is a little bit before, I guess I should say a good bit before my time. When it's showing kind of the, because I think it's set in like the 90s, so you're getting some of the the Showtime Lakers and a lot of Magic Johnson highlights and stuff. So you're kind of in, I guess, the late 80s, kind of coming into the 90s. There's just a lot of that is a little bit before my time, but it's still, as a basketball fan, especially when I was younger, being so big into basketball, that I still was very kind of familiar with this time and this era. And so even though it's before my time, watching this still made me feel so nostalgic for what the NBA used to be and what basketball used to really be. And obviously today, and I'm not going to be one of those that's talking about how the game is, inaccessible now and it's not as good as it used to be, but there is just something undeniable about talking about this specific era and just feeling the nostalgia and feeling nostalgic for this specific era of basketball. And so bringing that into this film is just phenomenally done. This is, I believe, I should have looked this up. I want to say this was Gina Prince Bythewood's directorial debut. And I knew the name because I had seen The Woman King a couple years ago, and then I want to say she directed The Old Guard, the Charlize Theron Netflix movie, and so I'd kind of seen her name, between those two films before, so I knew I had seen some films of hers. But this is one of those that when I watched this, I was like, this is. I mean, I should say The Woman King definitely kind of had. Probably had some more of her style. I need to rewatch that because the first time I saw that film, I definitely didn't give it a whole lot of attention and space that I needed to really kind of enjoy the film. But giving having this film feel like this is, I'm watching this being like, no, this is like a director's passion. This is something that she's very passionate about, telling this story and about creating this film. There's such a strong voice here from Gina Prince Bythewood, from the director, that I think is just what carries this story. And again, of course, the performances as well. They really kind of sell you on this romance, and they sell you on this love that again goes through the highs and the lows. And you really are feeling it when they are in love. You're really feeling it when they're breaking up, and you feel like the emotion that is just there throughout this film. There's just so much about love and basketball. I could go on forever. Again, about my love for now cinema, but specifically my love for basketball and the marriage that those two things did here in this film works so phenomenally. I'm so glad I finally saw this film because I truly do love and basketball. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know down below in the comments what your Letterboxd 4 would be for Black filmmakers for Black History Month. Also, just let me know what you think of these specific films that I talked about in this video, if we agree or disagree on our love maybe for a certain film. And then also just a heads up, in the next couple days, it might be 3-4 days from now, I will post the theme for what March is. I'm kind of already well into the swing of watching some of the films that are in that list, so it's just going to be a little late kind of announcing the theme, but that will come in the next couple days. So yeah, just again, let me know all of your thoughts down below in the comments, and if you'd like to like this video and then subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future videos in this series, my Letterboxd 4 themed series, I would greatly appreciate it, and have a great day.